So I was in the mood for something that was less likely to contain like a lot of violence, so I decided to read this book. It's called Really Good, actually, by Monica Heisey. The main character, Maggie, is officially divorced from her husband of less than 2 years. Well, actually, it's not official yet because there's like a 1 year waiting period before they can actually get divorced, but she's essentially a very young divorcee. Like, she's only just turned 29, and this is really, really upsetting for her because it feels a little bit like you didn't get things right. Like, there's this idea that people are supposed to, get married and have this happily ever after, and she felt like she had found like her perfect person and had been really settled in and felt safe in this relationship. So this separation has sort of hit her as a major shock, and it's upsetting more than just the romantic aspect of her life. Like, she's questioning almost everything, like about the choices that she's made, like wondering if there's something that she should have done differently. She's also looking at her job and discovering that maybe she doesn't even like what she's doing. Like, she is a graduate student in studying literature and originally planned to become a professor, but she finds that she maybe really isn't all that passionate about what she's studying. And everything in her life basically feels like it's starting to fall apart. But at the same time, she's determined to be okay. Like, she's technically putting herself out there, like using dating apps and going out on a bunch of dates with people, experimenting with the fact that she's decided she's really bisexual, and then like trying to make up for, I guess, this change in her life. But it's not really going very well, and it's all becoming this giant chaotic mess. So this is really a story about Maggie's, I guess, struggles to deal with divorce. Like, the fact that she is kind of like not especially young but not old yet. Like, she feels like being divorced is something that only should happen like to people who are older, as opposed to someone who's like not yet 30. Is causing her a lot of problems, and she's also having to deal with being alone, like for basically the first time in her life. Like, she's always had family or friends. Like, this is her first time actually living by herself, and she can't really even afford like the rent where she is currently living. So there's all these different problems that Maggie has to deal with on top of her emotional issues, and she's trying to get to a place where she can be okay with what happened, although deep down she kind of just wants everything to go back to the way it was. Something I liked. So I did pick up this story primarily because it was labeled humor, and like I said, it seemed pretty unlikely to contain a lot of violence or anything, and that turned out to be fairly true. Like, I did find quite a bit of it to be pretty funny. Like, for instance, there was this one part when she's trying to apologize to someone, and because they aren't talking to her, so she decided to do it by entering this thing where like your username you can put whatever you want. So she puts like her apology as her username and competes really hard to try to get that name up on the board where everyone's gonna see it. So like, there's these little things like in the way she, because this is a first person story, the way she talks about things and the actions she takes, that I did find humorous. But something I did not like. I don't have a lot of like tolerance, I guess, for self-pity, self-loathing, and self-destructive behavior, like all of which she engages in quite a lot. So she kind of wears away my sympathy by about 3/5 through the novel. And it turns into finding a lot of what she does and says and stuff kind of annoying instead. I think it's pretty well encapsulated in like this scene, for instance, where she's at a couples therapist, and the therapist asks her, oh, has she ever considered getting therapy? And she says, oh, no, because there's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't have any childhood trauma. She's never had anything really bad happen, and she's she's a perfectly good, normal, fine human being. And then the therapist asks, oh, well, then what about her husband or ex-husband, I guess, has he ever gone to therapy? And she's like, no, but she keeps telling him that he should, because he has all these problems that he really needs to address, so he should really go to therapy, and she booked this therapy appointment really for him, not her. And then there's this whole thought process where she planned to like get the therapist on her side to sort of prove that, you know, she was the one in the right, and she wants her husband to apologize and for, you know, to fix everything. Like, I guess a lot of the way she handles problems is this weird combination of being like really self-centered, where a lot of the problems she won't acknowledge were of her own making, but at the same time where there's a lot of self-loathing, where she's constantly being really derogatory about herself, like when she talks to other people, and where she's apologizing for everything, whether or not it's actually her fault. And it just becomes this kind of chaotic confusion of self-destructive behavior that I don't necessarily have a lot of sympathy for when it goes on for too long, especially to the point where she starts to really hurt, I guess, some of her friends, who are all people who care actually a great deal about her. But it does end well. Like, it doesn't fix everything, but, you know, she does realize her mistakes and some of her issues and figure out like ways to tackle it. So on the whole, like, I do think it was a fairly good story.